Hello, 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 hello. And hopefully everybody's fine at this tail end of, at least for me anyway, when I'm recording this, tail end of March. Today I'd like to revisit the study cycle. I mentioned this before, but a lot of people are here now that weren't here when I mentioned it before. So I thought it was a nice thing to go back and redo it because I think this is really important for learning something about how you learn actually and understanding how the process works. Now, what we've got here, let's see if we can do this, this is the supposed to be a book. I'm not an artist, guys. Okay. This is supposed to be a book. This is your brain. And the idea is to figure out how to get the information from the book or whatever it is you're reading or need to learn into your brain. Now, the fancy word for this is encoding. You might want to just say you're learning something or whatever, but if you're taking a look at people who look at education and the science of education, the terms are going to be encoding. There's a lot more to it than this, but this is basically what you're trying to do. You're trying to take the information from your, whatever it is you're trying to learn, whether it be a piece of music, whether it be a skill, whatever, and you're trying to get into your brain. So you're having to work with the process of encoding that information. Now, what most people tend to do is let's just use a book because it's going to be simpler for the example here, is you take the book and you read it and you think, okay, I got it. And then you close the book and you walk off. And then frequently I hear from students the comments that I have to read it 3 or 4 times before it really sinks in. The problem is if you're having to do that, it's because you're not encoding it properly in the first place. So this is where the study cycle comes in. So what happens after, or what should happen, I guess you should say, and I just realized I erased the word brain, so let me fix that, is that after you think you've got it encoded into your brain, like say you've read the chapter or whatever it is you're going to do, you test yourself. So after you get it up here, you test yourself. The question then becomes is it good or bad, or did you learn anything? Now, let's just say again that you've got a textbook, again, to simplify the example here, and your textbook has got some review or preview questions. So maybe what you might do to test yourself is to take a look at those preview or review questions and see if you can answer them. So you're going to have some that's going to be good and that you know the answer, and then some is not going to be not so good. So that means you've got to pretty much go back to where you start with the book again. Okay? Now, the thing about it is what most people then do is they start to go back and just reread the way they did before, which is a problem because if you did it the same way you did before, you're not getting it into your brain anyway because you just discovered from the test you took that it's not there. So why do it in the same process? So the idea is to go back and do something different so that when you're going back, what you're trying to do is encoding again, but doing it in a different way. And so this way I'm using a different color to indicate that it's a different manner of what you're doing. So let's just say maybe the first time around, you just read it. This time, maybe you want to highlight, maybe you want to take notes, maybe you want to read something else. Whatever you do, you try and do something else. And so what you're doing is trying to, Penny, no, I can't do this now. Okay, so let's see. I stopped that a bit to see if I could stop from the dog, so you didn't hear her bark. So you're trying to do something different. You're looking at it as notes. Maybe you're just doing something different. Maybe looking at another textbook. Maybe talking to somebody about it or whatever. But the idea is that you're going to do something different. Let's try for this example. Let's just say you go back and you read the material, but this time you highlight it. So you come back and we come back to the same point. You take your test and then see what you get or what you don't get. And the idea here with the study cycle is that you continue to go through the cycle until you basically pass your own test. So that if you think about it, if you can't pass a test immediately after you read, what makes you think you're going to pass a test in any other way, shape, or form, like on a teacher's test? So many times what may happen, perhaps could be, is that you really didn't pay attention to it in the first place. What a lot of people do when they say read, I think of as just basically word recognition. You're looking at this thing and going, encoding your brain, test, good. But you're not really trying to think and put anything together into your head to keep it here. So that your process of going through and encoding is where things break down. And it's how you improve your encoding process that gets you to learn something. So I don't care whether this is learning a piece of a skill, learning something from a book, learning a musical instrument. The idea is that you're trying to go through and take it from your, whatever it is that you're trying to learn, get it into your brain, and it's how you encode that. Now, you're going to say, well, if I keep doing this, I'll never learn anything. Okay, yeah, well, let me argue with that point. If you go through the process, and as I said in the first place, you get through with the encoding, get it to your brain, and then you still can't take a test, and you quit right there because you don't have the time to, quote, study, what are you going to do when you go to school and when you're going to take the test? It's not going to work anyway. You're going to have to come back later and do it again. You also, if you think in terms of it, if let's just say you have 50 pages to read and you only go through and do, say, 10 pages or a section of the chapter or something like that and get 10 pages done, but you go through this process and you understand those 10 pages really, really well, you're further ahead because then you can start to make some educated guesses on what comes with the other 40 pages. If you go through all those 50 pages and you have no clue what you just read, what's the point? You're just wasting time. So you're in a better position to try and use the study cycle and plan the time to do something to get that encoded into your head so that when you do take the test or show to class or whatever you're going to have to do to demonstrate that you've learned the material, you've actually got the material there. Now, if you're not in class, maybe you're learning something new at work or they're coming up with a new procedure or some such thing like that. Going over part of it and getting it understood and encoding it so that you can do it and go back to work and repeat it or whatever you do is going to, in a sense, save you time in the long run because you might do small segments of encoding over the course of time here as opposed to taking these large gobs of time to, quote, reread the whole thing and never get anywhere. Because I'm sure many of you have been in that position. You say, well, I've read the book 4 times and I still don't get it. Because your brain, in a sense, got bored. It didn't make sense out of it the first time you did it. You didn't test it. So each time you go back and you take a look at the material again, it sees the same material. It's not going to want to go back and reread that stuff because it's boring. What you have to do is, well, you don't have to do it, but it helps if you change it. Go back and do something that's going to be different. If you do this often enough, finally you may trip over something that's actually going to work. So maybe you discover that if you highlight and produce flashcards, that may be the best combination for you. So if you work at this over a couple of times, you'll find out what actually gets to the point where you can start it from here, get it, oops, go the wrong, uncode it, and then make a test and make everything come be good. What do you need to do to make this happen? How do things have to get encoded so you can get to this end point? And that's where going through the study cycle is beneficial. So I'm just going to leave it at that because I just noticed that we've been on here for over 8 minutes, but I hope that this was helpful. I'll go into it a little bit more in the message, but let me know whether you've got any questions or whether you found this helpful or whether you'd like to know more about it. Because I am actually trying to help you learn how to do this. And if it is interesting or you know it to share it with you or somebody you know, please feel free to do so. And we'll see you next week. Bye. Okay.